Hello, everybody. Good evening. Like Tom mentioned, my name is Nicole Maes-Gonzalez, and I am the ED of Gerard's House. My journey with Gerard's House started many years ago. I actually managed a local funeral home, and the funeral home funded Gerard's House. So I've been involved with Gerard's House since the very beginning. I was on the board of directors for many years, and I was a volunteer for around 15 years. And a little fun fact about our staff is the majority of us started as volunteers. And speaking of volunteers, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Roxana.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Roxana Melendez, and I'm the Outreach and Training Specialist for Gerard's House / Young Parents Program Director as well. And also, like Nicole mentioned, I started as a volunteer 8 years ago. I was connected to Gerard's House through my work as a preschool teacher. Unfortunately, through the tragic death of a student's mother, and we got connected to Gerard's House, all the teachers did. I just fell in love with the gentle model, asked if they needed volunteers, and took a training that same weekend. And I've been with Gerard's House ever since, and now as a staff member.
Thanks, Roxana. I'm going to share screen. Okay, I'm assuming you all can see my share screen. All right. So Gerard's House, like Roxana and I mentioned, we are a grief center for children who are grieving the death of or separation of a loved one. And we've been supporting the community since 1997. Our services include 18 weekly support groups. We have a mobile unit. We have suicide prevention programs. We have individual sessions, summer camps, all free of charge for ages 3 to 21.
All right. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about our principles. This is our model. This is what Gerard's House, kind of like the base, our foundation, and how we work with youth. So the first one is that grief is a natural reaction to the death for children as well as for adults. So at Gerard's House, we believe whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, whether it doesn't matter what culture, what background you come from. If you have lost something or someone that you love, you will go through the grief process, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's absolutely natural. And so when families come in, that means that we accept them in whatever part of their grief they're into. And then the second one is within each individual is the natural capacity to heal. Again, because grief is such a natural thing, we believe that every person really has what they need to heal. And so all we do at Gerard's House is provide a safe place so that they're able to access that within themselves, meaning that they're the ones that know what they need. And so when they come to Gerard's House, we're not trying to fix anyone or fix anything, because they're the ones that know better what they can find within themselves to heal. And then the third one is that the duration and intensity of grief are unique for every individual. So this is even within the same family, right? We might have seen this in our own experiences or with people around us who are grieving. Some people cry. Some people, it takes them a while to cry and they don't cry. Some people really like to talk about it. Other people don't like to talk about it and rather express it in other ways. And so this is where this comes in. We accept people in whatever way that they are grieving, and we just try and normalize that it's different and unique for everyone. And then the last one, that caring and acceptance assist in the healing process.
So we have 7 different programs at Gerard's House, and I will go ahead and talk about our core program, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Roxana and she can go over our largest program. So our core program is our Grief Connections program, and that is specifically for kids who are grieving the death of a parent or significant person. Most of those kiddos are grieving the death of a parent. So once again, it's peer support where kids come together weekly in a peer support group. And, volunteers, trained volunteers and facilitators, they're there and they're just holding the space for these kiddos. Like Roxana mentioned in our principle, everyone knows what they need to help with them throughout the process. So not only are we supporting kids, but we're also supporting parents and caregivers as they're parenting in grief.
Mm-hmm. And so our next program is the Nuestra Jornada, or our journey, the first one there on the list. And so this is a support program that provides support groups to Latino immigrant students in the Santa Fe public schools. And so again, like Nicole mentioned, one of our programs supports the death of a loved one. This one also supports the death of a loved one, but then also other immigration related losses, such as deportation of a loved one, incarceration, kidnapping, separation by borders, or parent abandonment. And so, like I mentioned, we conduct these support groups in the Santa Fe public schools, and then we do, I believe, 2 of them right now in-house as well.
Thanks, Roxana. So we're here for our entire community who are grieving. Our program mainly focuses on youth, but we have 4 weekly support groups that support adults who are grieving.
We also have a program called Stepping Stones, and this program provides support to any child or adult in a home that is dealing with a life-threatening illness. And so this is a mobile program, meaning that we can go to the home, we can go to the school. Before COVID, we were going to the hospitals as well. We really go wherever the family needs us to go, and then the child receives support as well as the adult.
Yeah, we also work in collaboration with youth shelters for young adults who are in transitional housing. They come to Gerard's house once a week for grief support.
We're also part of the crisis response team. So anytime that there is a suicide, youth suicide, or any death that affects students here in Santa Fe, as part of a team with other partners, we go in and we support students and staff members, which can include teachers and even administrators at schools as well. And then I'll do our last program, which is the Young Parents Teen Mom Nuestra Jornada group. So this is under the Nuestra Jornada umbrella, but this specifically supports Latino pregnant teens and also teen parents. So it supports them with the immigration related losses, but also in their journey of motherhood. Not only that, but we also support with basic needs. We give the moms diapers every month. We connect with resources. And so, any other type of navigation support services that we can offer, we do as well.
Yeah, the majority of our programs are mobile and bilingual.
Perfect. So these are a few of our program goals, things that we strive through in all of our programs and in our organization. And the first one is to provide a safety net for children and teenagers who are coping with grief and loss. The second one is to offer them relief from immediate suffering as well. So a lot of times when we're talking about grief, right, grief can be a lifelong process. And so there's really no ending to it. But what we do is right in the beginning, in that intense moments, we provide the foundation so that they can access tools and different things that they need along their journey that they can go back to and reconnect with whenever they're, in that process. The third one is to create a foundation for them to grieve in healthy ways. So again, we try to normalize grief. There's nothing wrong with grieving. It's a natural process, but there are also healthy ways of grieving, and there's healthy ways to let all that stuff out. With kids, we often talk about the Coke, right? When we shake a Coke a lot and we open it, it explodes. And so we often talk about grief and compare it the same way. When we're grieving and we leave all of those emotions inside, we tend to explode through different ways. Sometimes it can be, in aggressive ways. It can be in just, different outbursts. And so if we let it out little by little in healthy ways, it can help with that too. And then number 4, to uncover unmet needs and connect grieving families with services provided by our collaborative partners, or directly by Gerard's house through food drives, clothing drives, diaper drives, and direct financial assistance. So a lot of our families, because of different situations that have changed due to the loss of a loved one, or just for different reasons, find themselves in a difficult financial situation. And we know that it is almost impossible to access that part of trying to heal our emotional or, trying healing in our journey if we don't have our basic needs met. And so that's something that we've incorporated into our programs. We really strive to connect people with their basic needs so that they're at a better place than to be able to receive emotional support too.
Yeah, so a couple of snapshots for our group. On the left-hand side, that is one of our Nuestra Jornada groups that takes place in the public schools. Right now, I believe we're in 9 different schools, and all the children in that photo on the left-hand side, they've been identified by either their school counselor or their CIS site coordinator by needing grief support. So teachers and administrators allow us to take the kiddos out of class for an hour to get grief support.
Yeah, and really what is really sweet about these support groups is a lot of the times when we're grieving, we tend to feel lonely, we tend to isolate from other people. Sometimes we even feel like we're the only ones that are going through something like this. And so there's such a huge power of getting to connect with our peers, others who know exactly what it feels like to go through something like this. And so this is where our support groups really come in handy for these young people, is because a lot of the times we've had experiences, for example, in schools where 2 kids can be in the same classroom all year long, and then all of a sudden they're in a support group together from one of our Nuestra Jornada program groups, and then they find out that they both have lost a dad, or that they both have a mom that has been deported. And it's in that moment that they have that moment where they get to connect with each other, they get to build relationships and know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of connection, that activity right there is a common activity at Gerard's house. It's actually a friendship bracelet making activity. Yeah, and on the right-hand side, that is just one of our longtime volunteers supporting a grieving kid.
Mm-hmm. And it's really sweet because all of our volunteers have been trained how to work with grieving youth, but in a really gentle way where it's not pressuring any of them to open up, but more like we said at the beginning, creating a safe space where they can take it at their own pace too, and where that's respected no matter what age you are. So this over here is an activity that we do with kids, with teens, and even with adults. It's called the loss line. So they can create this in any way or form. And the idea is that they put on their different losses that they've experienced in their life. And again, it's about talking of like how death is a loss, but there's many other losses that we can experience in our life. And it's important, like for activities like this, that we can identify them, because then we're able to really understand our grieving process and begin our journey to heal. So for example, for this young girl who made this loss line, she wrote specific dates of different things that she considered were losses for her. And then on the bottom, she wrote what they were. So for example, there you can see in 2008, she put, "My dad was not there with me and my mom when my brother was born." And then you can see there on 2017, it says, "My mom got deported and got separated from my dog too, and had to leave my house." And then in 2019, she put, "Having a lot of problems, my dad having hard times at work." So you losses, this activity really helps them think of all of the different losses, get to express them, put them on paper, and then write their different symbols and different things that represent these losses for them. So these pictures, so we'll start with the one on the left. So the one on the left is a picture of a few moms from our Teen Mom, Young Mom support program. And so for this one, we did an activity with masks. So with this one, we talk about how often with grief, we tend to show one face out to the world of how we're doing, but then on the inside, it might feel totally different than what we really show. And we talk about different reasons why we might do that. Maybe it's because we don't feel comfortable sharing that, or maybe because it's a way to protect ourselves. And so what the moms did was on the outside, they wrote or they drew what they show out to the world. And then on the inside, they got to write and draw how they were really feeling too. And so again, this is a way of getting to express what they're feeling and getting to connect with each other too.
The photo on the right-hand side was taken from one of our Grief Connection summer camps. So throughout the summer, we facilitate multiple camps. Some take place at Gerard's house. Others have taken place in like Hyde Park and Camp Stoney and so forth. And once again, it's just to come together and support kids throughout the summer. They're actually in the middle of a play that we facilitate. It's called The Journey of Grief, and kiddos will reenact a journey, and then they'll also be able to create like boats, and they'll be able to place their boats on the tapestry that's on the wall, and they can place it in a really stormy area. They may be feeling really stormy that day, or maybe they're feeling like it's a good day and they place it next to the sun. So once again, just a lot of art and different expressions to support kids within their grief. Yeah, so a couple just of some highlights from 2021. So like Roxana mentioned, we take a holistic approach to serving our families. So if we know that a family has a food insecurity, we're going to connect them with our local food pantry, or if they need help, with rent, we're going to help them fill out a rent application and help meet those basic needs. Most of those are met outside our organization by our amazing collaborative partners, but some are met inside Gerard's house as well. So the photo on the left-hand side, that's Gerard's house. That's our big room, and it's filled with lots of fresh veggies and goodies. We had a local business who wanted to help make sure that our families have access to fresh, healthy food. So they came onto Gerard's house and they filled giant boxes of vegetables and cultural staples. Right there, the one down in the middle, the center of your screen, that is our volunteers stuffing the boxes, getting ready for the holiday drive. The top screen is, once again, our local Santa Fe community and their generosity. We had a local business donate 150, I believe, Christmas coats, 139 coats. So once again, these were new coats that they fundraised throughout the entire year, and our families got to come to Gerard's house and they got to actually choose a new winter coat. We also partnered with lots of other agencies to make sure to give out direct financial assistance, funds that can be used for rent and utilities, gift cards and diapers and holiday meals and art activities from local nonprofits. And just a couple of other highlights. So annually we serve usually around over 1,000, individuals. But we also, like I mentioned, we meet needs beyond grief. So in collaboration with lots of other nonprofits through Santa Fe, we connected people with over 2,000 urgent needs. 419 individuals participated in our food program. Roxana and her assistant Becky, they distributed 27,000 diapers, and our amazing volunteers, some have been volunteering for decades and they devoted over 2,000 hours to our programs. And we partnered with the city of Santa Fe, and throughout the pandemic, we've distributed over $160,000 in direct financial assistance. So yeah, I just want to close with the activity on the right-hand side. Yeah, so that is a map of feelings, and basically what we do, this is a common activity that is done within our support groups, and kids and participants, they're able to make a chart and then they associate those charts and feelings on where they're feeling their grief in their body.
So often we talk about how grief can be anything that you think, it can be anything that you do, or it can even be anything that you say when you've lost something important in your life, and how that can even manifest in our body. So like you can see there for that child said that in their body, they felt nervousness in their stomach, all the way from their mouth down to their stomach. They felt loneliness in their shoulders. They felt some, worried around their forehead and their thoughts and their mind. Even happiness and sadness in their eyes too. So just different ways to to express what sometimes it's hard to say in words.
All right, now we want to open up to a Q&A. Do you all have any questions that Roxana and I can answer?
Absolutely. Do we have questions? Jess, do we have things in the chat? No, not yet. Okay.
Not in the chat. I have a question though, if you want
Go
me to
for
start. So in our organization, we mostly serve adults, but especially after the pandemic, a lot of what we're hearing in the community is that there was a lack of behavioral health services for the youth. So I was just wondering, from what you see when you're working with the youth, what's one need that you see that we should be paying more attention to?
That's a great question. So yes, we I'd say there's a few of them, but something that comes to mind is during the pandemic, teens and kids were so isolated from their peers. And what we know is that, humans, especially at that age, they really need to be connecting with others. And it's part of their development. It's part of what they need. And so during that whole period that they didn't have that, and now that things are opening up, they get to connect, but not a lot of the times is there that awareness or that acknowledgement of like, yeah, but what about this period that was like kind of missed from your life? Are we talking about it? Are we acknowledging it for them? Are we giving them the space where they can talk about those things? And so it's important for us to acknowledge it and not just pass right through it like if it didn't happen, because things are better and because we might be in school and seeing each other more. It's important to also, acknowledge it and say, yeah, this was really hard. And even though we're now here, still giving the space to be able to talk about what it was like and maybe what are the effects that we're feeling right now from it. Yeah, that's just one thing. And I think that covers like a lot of the other things that are coming up that we see with youth.
Thank you.
Other people with questions? Betty?
I want to say, first of all, I'm so impressed with what you guys do. I've said that before, but I just, it's just, I never realized that, grief came in so many different ways. And these kids are impacted by so many kinds of grief. So I'm really impressed with all the connections you guys have made in the community and the work that you do. And geez, all the numbers of volunteer hours. I just had a question. Where did the name Gerard's House come from?
That's a really good question, Betty. So Gerard's House was established in 1997, and it was established in response to multiple teens who actually died during that time. So Gerard's House was named after a young man by the name of Gerard Sanchez, who was a senior at Capitol High, and he was killed in an accident. His parents, along with a Catholic nun, they boarded a plane to Portland, Oregon, and they got trained in the model that we use to this day.
Wow.
So it's a national model.
Mhm.
And then Bernard, I can never say their name.
Yeah,
The funeral home, they then funded the beginning.
exactly. Yep, you're absolutely right, Betty. So Berardinelli Family Funeral Service, we had a counselor who was working there on the time, and it was the Catholic nun that I mentioned. Her name is Sister Elaine I. Walter. She was a strong advocate for grief support for youth. So she actually advocated and presented this idea of a children's grief center to the owner. And he said, okay, I believe in you. Let me give you some funds to make this possible. So here we are 27 years later.
Mhm.
Right.
And we will sometimes have families that come to Gerard's House, adults, and they see Gerard's picture when they do their orientation. They're like, oh, I remember when he died, or I went to school with him, or we once had like, oh, he's my cousin. He was my cousin, so just different connections here in our Santa Fe community.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice. And I have another question. How do you get into the schools? How did you guys get into the schools? Because I guess you get referrals from them.
Mhm.
Did you just start cold calling, or because it's something we've thought about in terms of trying to get our word out to the schools with some alternative NAMI programs we have for youth. So
Yeah. So I can start, Roxana, and then you can fill the jump in. So we've been collaborating with the schools for many, many years, Betty. One of our first collaborations with the schools was through the crisis response that Roxana mentioned. So anytime that there is a death of a student or a faculty member, we bring Gerard's House within to the schools. And we've been doing that since Gerard's House was established. So we had been working with them for decades. And then we knew with our Nuestra Jornada program, one of the barriers that our families would face would be coming to Gerard's House. That's a huge barrier. Transportation is a barrier. So we thought, we're going to bring them to the schools. So we work really closely with communities in schools, and they're actually communities in schools, and they allow us to go into the schools to provide grief support.
Mhm. And I think something that helped too is when the Nuestra Jornada program was being created 7 years, almost 8 years ago. you know, even though Gerard's House offered support to Spanish-speaking families individually at that time, it was only our English program. And so at the thinking of like creating a program for Spanish-speaking families, an advisory was created with people who directly worked with the Spanish community here in Santa Fe. And part of those people, or some of those people, were school counselors, a teacher, you know, different people, you know, who worked in that level with students. And so from those connections, then, you know, we also, it was easier, or it was helpful to get into the Santa Fe public schools too.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. And our referral process is very easy. Roxana is going to drop some information into the chat. But if any of you all are grieving, or if you know anyone who needs grief support, they simply just call Gerard's House. Once they call Gerard's House, we'll get them connected with the group, and all of our services are free of charge.
And I think I saw someone raise their hand. Yeah.
So I'm Camille, and I want to thank Gerard's House for being there and lasting. Coming through the pandemic, you know, is really wonderful and impressive. My own children came to Gerard's House for support in 2005 when my daughter died by suicide. And so their sibling, they were grieving their sibling's loss. My son was 11 years old, and Janine had an older sister who came as well. And it was wonderful for them, and amazing really, because Santa Fe is a small community, and that we have this resource for children, specialized for children's grief, is amazing. It's really amazing. And that kind of leads to my question. I'm a facilitator for a survivors of suicide support group. It's an adult, and I get referrals from Gerard's House, and our group refers people with children who are grieving the loss of someone in their life. We refer them to Gerard's House as well. I recently got a question about any teen programs in Albuquerque for children. And, you know, I looked it up on the internet, and so I found the Grief Center of New Mexico. And my question is, do you collaborate with them? Are they similar to your program?
Yeah, first I just want to, you know, thank you for sharing your loss. And, you know, I'm glad that Gerard's House was able to support you and your family. And thank you for the work that you are currently doing. So yes, the Albuquerque Center, we work really closely with them. You know, our models are similar in a lot of ways. And you know, one of the ways is it's peer support. So once again, it's just kids and teens and adults coming together and supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I ask Camille, if you could maybe put in the chat something about the service you offer, and maybe it's something we could even add to our NAMI website.
Yes, I would love to connect with NAMI.
That would be great.
I get your emails. That's
Okay.
how I'm here, because I found out about this program. Sure, I'll do that.
Great, thank you.
Cameron had a question. Could we go to Cam?
Yeah, Cameron, and I really can't decide which question's more interesting, so feel free to pick one or the other. But my first question was just that I was so impressed by your outreach with bilingual programs, and I know that NAMI's just getting started on that itself. And so I'm curious just to expand on what Roxana already mentioned on how the Spanish programs got started. You know, today, how do you find, you know, peer facilitators, et cetera, who are bilingual in Santa Fe? You know, it's not always easy. at least to find employees I know who are bilingual in Santa Fe. So that was the one question. And the second is, I was really impressed by your referral process. And we used the county's Connect program. And I was curious if that's something that you've used, or if you had to create your own, referral program, especially for obviously organizations that aren't on Connect. So thanks.
Both questions are great. So I can maybe answer the first one, then Nicole, if you want to do the second one. But yeah, just kind of, and we're more than happy to keep connecting and discussing this even more too, with more detail. But as far as like creating the Nuestra Jornada program, so yeah, like I mentioned, and this is really how all of our programs are created too, is based on a need that we see in the community, and then reaching out to the people who are from the community or work with that community, who know best what it is that they need, right? And how to service them the best, and how to take down those barriers that may exist. And so with Nuestra Jornada, like I said, that was the first thing that was created, was that advisory committee. It had just different people in the community who knew exactly what it was, and that really shaped the program. Like, they said, yeah, our Spanish-speaking families are dealing with more than just the loss of a loved one by death. It's also all these other immigration-related losses. Let's expand that a little bit more. Transportation, let's do this then in the place where they trust. Usually parents trust the Santa Fe public schools. That's a big thing, right? Especially when talking about mental health or anything with our emotional well-being, with our community, the Spanish-speaking community, there needs to be trust developed. As far as finding people who can lead these groups and who can facilitate them, we had to, really get creative first, finding people who come from those communities who maybe, just have experienced these losses in their own life and want to then help and support others, and offering them opportunities. Maybe they're not licensed therapists, but they've had the life experience, and also seeing the importance in that too. Reaching out. There was a time where we went down Airport Road, giving out flyers and just talking to people and connecting with people. And what do you want? What would you like to see? And what would be something that you think would be helpful for you and your family? And those types of questions. And that was a big hit. We came back with a bunch of numbers and people that wanted to support in different ways, or get support from the program when it was created. And then also we also have volunteers and facilitators who maybe don't have the lived experience, and that's okay too. We provide training, different trainings on, how to support versus save, and how to support the Spanish community, even if you're not from that community, in a way that feels helpful to others. And so also providing those opportunities for anyone who wants to help. I don't know, Nicole, if there's anything else on that.
No, just once again, just like stepping back, right? I think, just stepping back and just really trusting the community and letting their voices be heard at the table. That's one thing I would mention. We are about to launch a program for support in the Okewinga Pueblo. And once again, traditional Gerard's house, we just got together a group of men and women from Okewinga community. And we took a step back and we hired somebody within that advisory committee to facilitate those groups.
And then I know there was like a second part to the question, but I don't know how we're doing on time.
Oh, we're doing fine on time, but that question was about the County Connect program, wasn't it,
Yes.
Cam?
Right, just if that's something you use, or if you had to build your own referral system.
Definitely. Yeah, well, what I'll say, Cameron, is that we've been collaborating before it became trendy. Gerard's house is a really small organization, and we have to be really resourceful. So yes, we created our own referral program prior to the Connect program, but now we are on the Connect program. And one of the ways that we meet the community need is through our internship program. We usually have 4 interns every semester. They are master level students who are studying counseling or social work. They collectively devote close to 80 unpaid hours at Gerard's house. So our interns, along with staff, they have helped meet those needs. And now I believe we have 3 licensed navigators, 4 licensed navigators at Gerard's house.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Betty, or any other questions?
I do have another question. You mentioned a crisis response team. Is that your own, or is that through the county or the cities, or do you collaborate with them on any of that?
Yeah, definitely collaborate with lots of different organizations, but our main partner, Betty, is the Sky Center. So
Okay.
we work in collaboration with the Sky Center, where once again, we bring Gerard's House and the Sky Center to either public schools, different faith communities, as well as our business partners.
So, but I guess my question was if a, we have the ARU, which is the city's crisis response, and then we have the county's crisis response team. I'm just wondering, do you guys ever get called in on those when they get called in, or do you work with them at all?
I
when you
haven't.
said crisis response, I was thinking of those two, but it sounds like you have your own kind of crisis.
Yeah, definitely. We have our own crisis response team, and that's usually responding to a crisis that is, the death of a student or a parent and so forth. But we do work with lots of other agencies.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly responding to crisis in the Santa Fe public schools.
I've got a couple questions, if everybody else has had a chance to get theirs out. And first of all, thank you for the presentation. Absolutely outstanding. And I especially like the little stories about why you were doing what you're doing personally. I think that's extremely meaningful, and I really honor the feelings that you have for doing this. But the first thing is just from your point of view, supporting people struggling through grief in the community. What do we need to do as a community to do a better job helping people in grief both find support and succeed in working through their grief to, move on and become all the things they have the potential to become?
So in our model that we just read, the last one talks about caring and acceptance. And I was just actually talking to a volunteer about this the other day, how, grief has been a taboo subject for a long time. And now, we're talking about it more, as well as mental health and all of those things too. But it's really important for us to, and it's interesting because we all go through grief, right? We were talking about it right before we got on. Grief is in a lot of different parts of our lives, right? Yet when we see someone grieving, a lot of the times it gets us in this place of nervousness where we're like, we don't want to cause damage. We don't know what to say. And because we know it's a painful thing for someone. And so I think there's different answers to that, but I think one of the answers is being comfortable in the not knowing and being comfortable in the pain with other people, which is not easy. It's not easy to do, but I think we can support others when we're able to sit in that pain with other people without trying to fix anything, because that does more than when we actually try to fix it. So for example, sometimes at Gerard's house, we'll find people who are grieving and, they're just letting it all out and talking and telling us about all these different things. And the most powerful thing that we tell our volunteers that we can do is not even what we say, but just listening. And so I think that often a lot of people, sometimes we get too much in our heads and we're like, oh, I want to say the right thing. What is the right thing? Well, there is no right thing. When we're in that deep pain, there is no right thing. But what we can do is, maybe pause in our busy lives for a moment, take the moment to really listen to someone with a compassionate ear, and then offer the resources that are there. And maybe that means going with that person that first time, maybe taking that extra step and walking with them, holding their hand through it. Sometimes at Gerard's house, we have people that will call, and sometimes it's like a neighbor and says, I know my neighbor, they just had, the dad that died in their lives, and they're in a really hard moment, how can we connect them to you guys, so even just those things, taking that initiative and trying to support in those ways can make a big impact too.
Thank you. Because it would be really great if we could take and figure out how to communicate that more broadly in the community, that people need to realize how to do this. I mean, with suicide prevention, there's a whole training that is given about how to do that very kind of listening when somebody is in those difficult, very depressed situations. And it would really be great if, you know, everybody not only were aware of the services, but also were aware of how to help people who needed the services. So I thank you for that answer. You mentioned a little bit about how the needs have changed during COVID, but you know, when you look at the people you're seeing coming through your door and how it's changed the last few years, beyond just the fact that people haven't been able to have the physical connection, which is so important to mental well-being and emotional well-being, are you seeing anything else important that the people in the community need to realize about how grief and the people who are grieving have changed during COVID? Are there any major new risks that have come up that weren't there before COVID?
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in, Roxana. So, you know, one of the things that COVID has taught us, one of the many things, Tom, is that, yeah, that financial support, you know, like Roxana mentioned, you know, there could be a death or a separation of a loved one, and then that, you know, creates financial hardships. You know, something else that was just recently published was, you know, alcohol related deaths in New Mexico. And we're leading the country in alcohol related deaths in New Mexico. And that is working, you know, adults that usually have kids. So definitely seeing an increase of kids who are grieving the death of a parent due to some type of substance abuse.
And I think the other thing that I'll add too is just really like looking at the whole family too, because so we're talking about supporting kids too, but like, for example, with our young parents, teen parents program, we talk a lot about what about us, the parents, right? What kind of healing do I need to do from what I've been through in the past, or even from the pandemic that maybe is in that cycle, right? Maybe it was passed on from, you know, survival, trying to survive from one generation to the other, and maybe hasn't been healed. And where can I look deeper inside of me? Maybe things that are coming out through my parenting that I don't even notice, and paying extra attention to healing those parts of us and the impact that can have in our kids too, whether it's grief or from anything else. So it's really paying attention to all those, making sure that it feels supportive. And I think just to, you know, what you were mentioning, Tom, too, is it's important to think about it as in the pandemic, but then also think even past that, right? What are all the different things that have came up for us, and making a space for that too. And then also really using this time where I, like, you know, at least in since I remember, this is the time where I've heard the most people talk about and the most awareness about mental health. And even if you still have to keep working on it, you know, I remember being a teen and never hearing a teacher talk about this, never hearing anyone at my school, besides maybe the school counselor once in a while, talk about these things. And so really utilizing the time that we're living in to create conversations with our youth and with our adults too about these things.
I think that's a great idea. I would love to figure out how to get our public leaders to figure out how to embrace that, even something as simple as just a community grieving event over the passing of COVID, just to, you know, let people come together in support of one another. But let me ask a different question. What you mentioned, alcohol deaths. There are also overdose deaths, which frequently can be very sudden and very traumatic. Do you have special supports, programs, counselors that are prepared to work with people who have lost a loved one due to substance use?
So our program, Tom, is it's not a clinical program, but everyone is a trained facilitator that has taken a 27-hour training. They're diverse. Some of them are mental health clinicians, others are retired educators and entrepreneurs and so forth. So basically, we, all losses that we're grieving, we just want to support in any way possible. So no, we don't, have a special support group that is specifically for alcohol or substance abuse death, but we're aware of that. We're aware of that, and we're, thinking like, how can we respond and be supportive? It was just like COVID when there was during the height of the pandemic, we came together. We had a panel discussion with leaders in the grief dying community. And we just chatted like, how can we support families who are grieving the death from somebody from COVID when they didn't have a chance to memorialize their loved one? They didn't have a chance to gather. So definitely community discussions and constantly creating new ways to meet the community's need.
Thank you.
I think-
Do you have an alumni group? In other words, do you keep providing support to your alumni at some whatever level they might find valuable after they've gone through their most intense period?
Yeah, so there's not a time limit on any of our programs. Some participants will drop in for a few years and then they may take a year off, and then they may get triggered or have a new death that they're grieving and they jump back in. What I will say is we have a good amount of participants who are now trained volunteers.
Excellent.
So they are part of like our alumni, so to speak. We also have multiple advisory committees, like Roxana mentioned, our Nuestra Jornada advisory committee, and then we have our Okewinga community advisory community.
Another question, how it seems to me one of the groups that really should be seeing the effects of grief are medical professionals, nurse practitioners, doctors. Are they a source of your referrals that people's doctor says they need to come and, get some help from somebody working through something that may be emotional, but your picture that the young man drew showing his body and all the different places that grief was manifesting itself. Do you have a link with the medical providers, and is that a channel where people find your services?
Yeah, it's one of the channels, Tom. We work really closely with lots of hospitals, funeral homes, hospice centers, schools. We work really hard to make sure that we connect with the community. And Roxana, if you wouldn't mind discussing your circle of supports that you facilitated for mental health professionals and other.
Yeah, of course. So we also offer circle of support, supports that we do, which it can be, we've done it for teachers, we've done it for school counselors. We actually do it for school counselors at least once a year or so. We've done it for social workers and UNM hospital. We did it for nurses too. So our circle of supports that we provide is a safe space for these people that are in the front lines providing, emergency medical services to people, and that see a lot, right? And really intense things, and are usually grieving their own things. And then on top of that, seeing these really difficult raw moments too. So we create these safe spaces so that they have a safe space where they can access that in whatever way they feel comfortable in. It's usually like 2-3 hours, one time, maybe twice, and then giving them a foundation, a safe spot so they can explore that and then continue doing the amazing work that they do for our community.
Well, thank you again for an absolutely great presentation, great answers, and most important, great services to the community. I see we still have a few more questions. Camille, would you like to make another comment or question?
Yeah, I just would like to circle back to something you said, Tom, about suicide prevention training, or just training in particular. Do you at Gerard's house provide or open your training to other collaborators for particularly where I feel the need is how to talk to children or what to say to children about grief. And even with my own grandchildren, I'm at a loss for words. And for the last 17 years, I've been with adults and among peer support, and I know that language, but I don't know the language that you talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that is definitely one of the things that we do. So we do it in different ways. Our support group for parents also supports them in how to talk to their youngs about death and loss and grief. And then also we just do it out to the community. So for example, at Capitol High School, I believe 2 years ago, or maybe even a year ago, we did a training about how to support grieving students, how to support grieving youth. We've done it for teachers, for counselors, where again, we give the wording or we support in finding the wording too. And then in just what are essential things that youth need when talking to them about grief, death, and loss. And then just the other way that we support is sometimes we'll have families with really young ones, like 3 or 4 year olds who have had usually a parent or someone else die. And they're like, I have no idea how to give them the news. I don't even know how to tell them, how to explain to them how they will understand. And so what we do is we support them. We ask, we tell them, so we can work with the parent and give and help you in finding the wording to tell, or we can even be there when you tell them and support in that present moment too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions anybody might have? Well, I think I speak for all of us. Thank you for everything you do for the community. Thank you for what you do for the people who are grieving, especially the children. And, we at NAMI look forward to being able to partner with you in any way we can. We're just, we're grateful your organization is here and for all the great work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for inviting us, and thank you for the work you
Look
do.
forward to working together.